This is the BBC Home Service. Here is a special bulletin read by John Snagg. D-Day has come. Early this morning, the Allies began the assault on the northwestern face of Hitler's European fortress. The first official news came just after 9:30, when Supreme Headquarters of the Allied Expeditionary Force, usually called SHAFE from its initials, issued Communique Number 1. This said, under the command of General Eisenhower, Allied naval forces, supported by strong air forces, began landing Allied armies this morning on the northern coast of France.
The roar of the aircraft engines was deafening. As a British paratrooper, I knew the success of Operation Tonga hinged on our ability to land and secure key positions behind enemy lines in Normandy. The night of June 5th, 1944 was pitch black, and the only light came from the moon and the distant flashes of anti-aircraft fire. As we approached our drop zone, the tension among us was palpable. I clutched my rifle tightly, my heart pounding in my chest. The red light turned green and we jumped. The air hit me like a wall and I plummeted down towards the dark fields below. My parachute opened with a jolt and I began my descent. I landed awkwardly in a hedgerow, quickly unbuckling my harness and scanning my surroundings. The sounds of war were everywhere. Gunfire, explosions, and the distant rumbles of tanks. I quickly regrouped with my fellow paratroopers and we moved towards our objective, securing the bridges over the Orne River and the Caen Canal. Our mission was critical. If we failed, the Germans could use the bridges to launch a counterattack against the beaches where our comrades were landing in the morning. We advanced cautiously, using the cover of darkness to our advantage. As we approached the first bridge, we encountered heavy resistance. German soldiers were well entrenched and a fierce fight ensued. Despite being outnumbered, we fought with determination and grit. I fired my rifle, took cover, advanced, and fired again, the rhythm of combat. The training kicked in and we moved as one cohesive unit. Slowly, we began to push the Germans back.
Keep moving. We have to secure that bridge or our boys landing at Gold won't have a chance.
The bridge was ours, but the cost was high. Many of my comrades lay wounded or dead. We moved to the next objective, knowing there was no time to mourn. The battle for the second bridge was equally brutal, but we were relentless. By dawn, we had secured both bridges, cutting off the German reinforcements and protecting the flank of the invasion force. Exhausted but triumphant, we dug in and prepared for the inevitable counterattack. Looking at the faces of my fellow paratroopers, I felt a surge of pride. We had accomplished our mission against all odds. The success of Operation Tonga played a crucial role in the overall invasion of Normandy, and I was honored to have been a part of it. As the sun rose over the battle-scarred landscape, I knew this was just the beginning. The road to victory would be long and arduous, but we had taken the first crucial step. Something glinted out of the corner of my eye. I thought I could almost see the horizon lined with ships as they landed on the beaches. I said a prayer for my little brother. He was part of the 50th Division, landing at Gold Beach. I had told my mom nothing would happen to him, and I was determined to keep that promise. Welcome to Talk with History. I'm your host, Scott, here with my wife and historian, Jenn.
Hello.
On this podcast, we give you insights to our history-inspired world travels, YouTube channel journey, and examine history through deeper conversations with the curious, the explorers, and the history lovers out there. Now, Jenn, we're just going to jump right into it because this is a series we have been anxiously wanting to get out into the world for quite some time. Quite a few months ago, we made plans, for you to get out to Normandy. So if anybody follows us on our Walk with History YouTube channel, they would have just seen our first video from there. And you went to the 80th anniversary, you went to do a multitude of things out there. But the day before the actual 80th anniversary day, you were out at the Gold Beach kind of memorial out there. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I went to the 80th anniversary of D-Day ceremony and celebration at Normandy, and there was a lot of people there. It was very busy. The tour guide said it's the busiest they have ever seen it.
And if anybody's listening to this, it makes sense, right? This being the 80th anniversary, there's not going to be another kind of big number anniversary, really, where there's going to be any veterans that'll most likely be there.
We'll see. There was about 120 veterans at this one. I bet the 85th will be another big one.
Yeah.
And we'll see maybe the 90th. I think those will probably be our last these will be our last three big ones.
Yeah, and I think because the majority of the World War II vets that were there were probably in the youngest in their 90s.
They're in their 90s. Oh, absolutely.
At the absolute youngest. I mean, there's some I've seen recent interviews with. They're 102, 103.
Exactly. So it was just a real honor to be there. But because it was so busy, the first day we got there, we were supposed to go to the American Normandy Cemetery. We couldn't get there. It was too crowded. They shut it down. We went to Omaha Beach, but we were barely there for 10 minutes. And then that got shut down for the next 3 days. So we really didn't get to make it back out to Omaha Beach again. We'll talk about it on another podcast, just the little bit we got to do, which is mostly in reels on Instagram. I don't even think we can't even make a full video on YouTube because we just weren't there long enough.
Yeah, because you were there. I didn't get to go. I had to stay back with kids and work. But you got to get out there with some Navy veteran friends of ours. So when you say we, that's who you're talking about for our listeners here.
Yeah, I went with two other female Navy veterans, officers that I had served with. And when Scott says he has to stay back and work, Scott had to stay back and be a naval officer in the United States Navy. So he couldn't make it to D-Day because he was actually doing the real deal. But the first place we were able to really go and get out and see and just experience it all was Gold Beach.
Now that one was a little bit unique this time because, and I know we'll touch on this, and I'll let you walk us through what you saw for the day. But one of the big things there was obviously there was like a memorial there, but they also had the Standing with Giants silhouettes, which a lot of people may have seen pictures of. But walk us through, or walk our listeners through, getting there and what all is there at Gold Beach.
So just a quick background. We're not going to go right into much of the history of Gold Beach, but I'm going to give you a quick background so you know what Gold Beach is. So remember, there are 5 beaches that are part of Operation Overlord. And Operation Overlord is the entire operation of the landing on the French beaches against the Nazis. So these are the Allies, the British, the Americans, the Canadians, the Polish, the Dutch. It's everybody the New Zealanders, if you can think Australians, everybody who is together trying to overcome Nazi Germany. And they have since they've been joined with Italy and Japan. So they are the Axis powers. And so they have taken France, the entire country of France. For 4 years, they have occupied this country. And the British basically have gotten away back to England and been planning. And that's what's been going on for about a year. They've been planning this big operation. And Eisenhower, at the time, General Eisenhower, is in charge of all of it, oversees all of it. So this is the day, D-Day. And when people ask me what does D-Day mean, it means day. So D-Day is day.
Yeah, it's like the day.
It's like the day. So the D doesn't really stand for anything. It's the day. So it's Operation Overlord is the entire operation. We're going to get Operation Point Blank, where British and American bombers are going to start bombing at midnight, the night of June 6th. And you're going to get over 2,200 bombers just bombing all of these strategic areas on the French soil, which is now all occupied Nazi Germany. And then Operation Neptune will be the naval side. Neptune will start first because Neptune will start with the bombardment, amphibious bombardment of the coast. So it always will have Neptune before the landings. There's 5 beaches, basically. And if you go from east to west, I guess that's the best way to go, or maybe from west to east, it's going to start with Utah Beach, an American beach, Omaha Beach, an American beach, Gold Beach, the one we're talking about, is like the joining beach between the American beaches and the other Allied beaches. And Gold Beach will be British. Then you're going to have Juneau, which will be a Canadian beach, and Sword, which will be another British beach. Utah and Omaha are named by the Americans. The story is that when Eisenhower was planning, the men who were writing, he asked, where are you from? And the two men who were typing out the operation plans, one was from Omaha and one was from the state of Utah.
I did not know that.
So they named the beaches after those two men.
Huh.
For the Allied side, the British side, Churchill went with fish names. So swordfish, goldfish, and it's supposed to be jellyfish for Juneau. But Winston Churchill couldn't see men dying on Jellyfish Beach.
Yeah.
So he changed it to Juneau Beach. So when you hear Gold Beach, sometimes it's referred to as gold, but it's goldfish. That's where it comes from. So again, this is the middle beach of these 5 beaches. It's completely British authority. It's the British who are taking this beach. So what we went to was the British Normandy Memorial. And I don't want it confused with the American Normandy Cemetery, because the American Normandy Cemetery is a cemetery where men are buried. The memorial, men are not buried there. It's a memorial, and it overlooks the entire Gold Beach.
Yeah, and you guys did a good job of, as much as I love, and I'm biased towards my own B-roll footage, right? A little behind the scenes here of YouTube. You and Bonnie and whoever's holding the camera kind of did a good job of kind of really showing what the view looked like. It is a beachhead kind of going uphill, right? So you can look out over this beach and you can see down to the water, right? And it's not super steep, right, where you guys were, so it's pretty long. So there's a long way to go to get all the way to the top of the beachhead. Now, when I was doing the editing and putting the video together, the fighting on this beach wasn't, but this is specifically a British memorial, right? And I think you were saying when you were there, it looked like there were some British soldiers practicing and stuff like that, potentially for Prince William or somebody like that.
So I was at the American ceremony. I was at the American Normandy ceremony at the American Normandy Cemetery.
Oh, so that
Yes.
that was at the cemetery.
Yes.
That's where the ceremony
Yes.
was. Okay.
The British ceremony was at that location.
Okay, and that's what you saw
Yes.
they were prepping for when you were there the day before the actual 80th anniversary on June 5th.
And it was Prince William. Prince William had
Okay.
come, and he was in place of King Charles, and he served.
Yeah.
So he was the big dignitary there. So when you think of Gold Beach, it's going to be the British, the Dutch, the Polish, and other allies. So it's really their militaries that were also part of that ceremony there. And so that's what you see in the video is those militaries.
Little clips. You even hear the band playing in the background, which is neat because they were playing old school music and stuff.
It was really neat. And their memorial, if you look down from the sky, looks like a British flag.
Oh.
So with the walkways are making that crisscross design of the British flag. And they have names on pillars. About 300, a little over 300 men will die on Gold Beach that day. They'll land 25,000 men, the British and Allies, and they'll have a little over 1,000 casualties, but 350 men will die.
It is announced a little later that General Montgomery is in command of the army group carrying out the assault. This army group includes British, Canadian, and United States forces. The Allied Commander-in-Chief, General Eisenhower, has issued an order of the day addressed to each individual of the Allied Expeditionary Force. In it, he said, "Your task will not be an easy one. Your enemy is well-trained, well-equipped, and battle-hardened. He will fight savagely. But this is the year 1944. The tide has turned. The free men of the world are marching together to victory. I have full confidence in your courage, devotion to duty, and skill in battle. We will accept nothing less than full victory. Good luck, and let us all beseech the blessing of Almighty God upon this great and noble undertaking."
The world seemed to slow down. Every move I made on this cursed boat felt like a lifetime. Was that Winston Churchill over the radio earlier? The only thing I could hear now was the deafening sound of gunfire and artillery in the air. All around me, the sea had red patches. Never seen that before. As an infantryman, I was among thousands of British soldiers landing at Gold Beach on D-Day. The tension on my fellow countrymen's face was palpable as our landing craft approached the beach. We were under heavy fire, but we were determined. As soon as our landing craft hit the beach, I jumped out and ran towards the sand dunes for cover, my heart pounding in my chest. I could see the German bunkers up ahead. We were outgunned, but we pushed forward. We were trained for this. We knew our mission. I fired my rifle, took cover, advanced, and fired again, a rhythm of survival and duty. Despite the chaos around me, I felt a strange sense of clarity. I was fighting for my country, for our freedom. I saw comrades fall, but we kept going, driving the Germans back, securing the beachhead. By the end of the day, we had accomplished our mission. I was one of the lucky ones who survived. Looking back at the beach, I barely realized the enormity of what we had just done. I wondered if my brother had made his jump okay.
Their names are the closest inside the memorial. And then as you walk outside the memorial, there's names on pillars. They consider Normandy landings from June 6th to the end of August. So all of the men who died from June 6th to the end of August are listed as you walk out towards those pillars. They also honor 20,000 French civilians who were killed during this Normandy landing. And they're also listed a little bit farther out as well. But again, you have the civilian casualties of war.
And that was another interesting thing in the listener. Well, if you're listening to this podcast, you'll hear in some of the vignettes as we go through this that they were actually, the Allied forces were actually making radio kind of announcements or, good guy propaganda, trying to announce things to the French people via the radio saying, hey, don't fight back. Essentially, keep your hopes up. And then they also gave them a little bit of warning
to get out into the
to get out into the countryside, because it's like, which makes sense. You'd never really think about it. You're like, well, aren't they giving away what they're doing to the Germans? Well, the Germans would have known long before that, right? Long before, an hour before the actual landing.
Sure.
They would have detected them. They're like, okay, they're coming. But the French people wouldn't know that. And so they hear it over the radio. They're like, okay, it's time to hightail it out of here. But of course, there's still going to be casualties.
So there was a lot of espionage, but there was a lot of, what's the word I'm looking for? We're like...
kind of like gamesmanship almost.
Gamesmanship. They were projecting these false operations.
Sure.
So to keep the Germans guessing. And they were doing that for about 3 months before they actually did this.
Oh, wow.
Pretending, I forget what they called it, Operation Bodyguard, I think, but these fake operations that they were doing to keep the Germans on their toes. And fortunately, I think I remember correctly, Hitler had gone to bed early on June 5th and told not to be awakened for any reason whatsoever.
Oh my gosh.
So when things were happening on June 6th, they didn't wake him and tell him. Even though this is a big deal, he was not woken up until well into the day on June 6th.
Oh my gosh.
And so he couldn't send even quick responses because they were too afraid to wake him. Lucky for the Allies. Now, like you said, things start at midnight on June 6th. You're going to get gliders coming in from the British, which are so accurate. They're taking out these big bridges. Because when you think of Normandy, I want you to think of farmland. And this farmland, the way that it's fertile is it floods. Think of the Nile. Is they flood this farmland to keep the soil very fertile. And when they do that, there's no way to connect these areas but these big bridges that bring you in. And the Germans occupied these big bridges.
Okay.
And the Germans had flooded farmland on purpose to make some roads unusable.
Sure.
So what the Allies had to do was capture these bridges. And that's is what they're going to do for Utah Beach and Omaha Beach. That's what our airborne, they're doing the same thing. They're trying to capture these strategic bridges to get not only the Allies onto the beaches and get all of their material across the bridges into theater, but to stop the Germans from using those bridges to fight back.
Yeah, they're also trying to cut off the German kind of supply and logistics. Yeah.
So you get the Americans are doing it at Utah and Omaha Beach, and then the British and the Dutch and the Canadians are doing it over on Gold Beach and Sword Beach and Juno Beach as well. So they're really the first to go. It's the airborne and the gliders that are going to be the first out. And the bombing also of the strategic outside of that area. But those gliders are so accurate. They land right where the bridges are. They pop open. There's like 20 men in a glider, and they were able to take those bridges really with no fight back. So it was really nice for the British. Now, you had said Gold Beach is not like Omaha Beach. No beach will be like Omaha Beach.
I mean, there were still casualties.
There's still casualties. But no beach of the 5 are going to encounter as much resistance and firepower and just the way that the topography of the beaches are against the Allies like Omaha. That's why it's called Bloody Omaha. You will have more losses on Omaha than any other beach, and we'll talk about that. But the topography of Utah and Omaha are not like these nice. Gold has a nice, straight, clear beach. Utah and Omaha are very rocky, and they have the Point of Hawk is in the middle of them, so it kind of like cuts off, and it's not as easily, the terrain is not easy for them.
It's easier for the Germans to defend.
Yes.
Right? Because of the terrain, yeah.
So Gold Beach, again, what happens is the Navy bombardment starts at 5:30. So you're going to get the bombers starting at midnight, the airborne and the gliders go at midnight, and then the Navy bombardment starts at 5:30. So what does that mean? The Navy gets as close as they can to the beach and just starts hitting the beachhead as hard as they can with their guns. And what's very lucky is they take out 3 of the 4 major guns.
Oh, wow.
They're taken out by 6:20. So that's great. You only got 1 major gun then still manned on Gold Beach. Now that gun takes a day to get out. They really don't even get it out to June 7th.
Wow.
But it's only 1 major gun. So their Navy ships are pretty accurate, taking out those big artillery guns. And then the first landings happen about 7:25. Now that's about an hour after Omaha Beach. And the reason why is because of tides.
Oh, sure.
So when we talk about these beaches and what they did with the obstacles on the beaches is, you remember in Saving Private Ryan, they have all the hedgehogs out. And those are those weird twisty metal looking things that keeps amphibious craft from landing on the beach. What it also does is during high tide, when you can't see them, if boats hit them, it makes boats capsize. And what they would also do is put mines on the end of those. So if you also hit them, you would blow up. So you had to wait till low tide because you had to wait till you could see all those things. But low tide, we're Navy officers, also means you have a huge amount of beach to cover.
Yeah, and depending on where you're from and what beach you're used to, right? Growing up in California, when the tide goes out, it drops off pretty quickly. It's not like beaches in Florida where you can walk out, or in that part of the country where you can walk out for a quarter mile and the water is only knee deep the entire time. Where in California, it drops off to incredibly deep water within 50 yards or less than, sometimes even less than that. What I saw, and you were able to show a little bit of the Gold Beach there, but you see from some of the historical footage that we cut in is that these are one of those beachheads, just like you said, for farmland, is that the shoreline, when the tide goes out, there's a lot of beachhead. It's long for them to come in from the ship all the way up to where it's essentially dry, where the tide wouldn't go up any higher, and then get to the whatever it is, the embankment, the guns, where the Germans actually were. So that's kind of the risk on each side. It was actually less risky to wait for the tide to come out so they could land these landing craft, roll the tanks up or the soldiers or whatever it was, so that they didn't run into these hedgehogs and mines and things like that.
Exactly. And then you think of all that beach you have to cover with all that gear. And it just seems daunting. The only place I really understood the expansiveness of it was Omaha, because I happened to be on Omaha when the tide was out. And it was a huge beach. Even when you think from the shore all the way to the first grassy area. That's a lot of beach to cover in full gear. When I'm thinking 50 pounds of gear when you're taking tons of hostile fire. So you can imagine this is what's happening on Gold Beach as well. Now, like I said, they're landing 25,000 men, and they secure the beachhead by the end of the day. So they're able to meet their goal. Now, Gold Beach is instrumental because it has to join Omaha with Sword or with Juneau. So it has to join Omaha with Juneau. Like, it's the middle beach.
And if people aren't familiar, if you haven't really looked into the beachheads there, it's over 50 miles of continuous beachhead across these 5 beaches, right? So when we say that, like, they're all continuous kind of along the French coast, but it's a well over 50 miles from one end of one beach all the way to the other end of the other beach. So it's a pretty expansive piece of the coast that they are landing on.
Yeah, it's really beautiful now. It's really flat now, but at the time I can imagine it was just overwhelming. What we got to see was the British Normandy Memorial, and they just have recently built it. It just was unveiled June 6th, 2021 for the 77th anniversary.
I didn't know that.
Well, the British felt like they don't have their place, right? Like, the American cemetery at Normandy is like where we had the ceremony. It's our place. It's also a cemetery. Now, there is this World War II cemetery for the British. It's a little farther inland, but it doesn't have the place on the beach. So they wanted something to show the memorial of what the men did where you can see it. And it lists over 22,000 names from more than 30 countries under British command who were killed at Normandy from June 6th, again, to the end of August 31st. And as you move from the center out, their names will be listed as the days go out from June 6th. So you can look on the pillars and find names. And I found Benny's and I found Mitchell's. And so it was really neat to see all those names on there. The centerpiece is a bronze statue of 3 British soldiers attacking the beach, and it was made by David William Ellis. It really is reminiscent to me of the one at Omaha Beach and the one we saw at Bedford. Again, just about you with your comrades together, handling it together.
It's a classic kind of World War II soldiers charging in.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And you would know they were different because of their helmets. They have different helmets than the Americans. Now, the standing with giant silhouettes is what's really impressive there as well.
Those were really cool. And it's the thumbnail. Yeah, we used one of them, a picture of one of them as the thumbnail of this particular video. But they're displaying all these different kinds of soldiers and airmen and sailors that were involved in this.
Yeah, so it depicts 1,475 giants, who are the number of servicemen who died under British command on D-Day. So not at Gold Beach, but in all the beaches and the airborne and the bombers. So anyone who died that day under British command is depicted with a silhouette. And that's why there's 1,475 of them. And they all look different because they're doing different jobs in the military. And so it's very neat to see pilots or naval officers or army officers. It's very neat to see how they look. Their silhouettes look different. And that people have little placards with quotes on them. And we found Dick Winters. Those placards will stay.
Oh, okay.
But the silhouettes will go.
Yeah, they were only there basically for the 80th anniversary.
Yes, they're supposed to leave the end of August. But there's 2 women depicted. There's 2 Army nurses, Sister Evershed and Sister Field. They died on D-Day trying to save men on a sinking hospital ship. So their silhouettes are also depicted there. So that's very neat to see.
Yeah, theirs was cool because it had that cutout, like from the waist down. You could see the metal kind of silhouette of them, and then there was like that hollow, so you could see the sky as they would fill in the rest of the gaps. It was really neat how they did it.
Yeah, they were really neat, and and to have women depicted. They're the only 2 women of the 1,475. I think it's such a neat memorial. I really don't want them to take it down at all. I think it would just be great. It doesn't really impede on the view And I thought it was just an amazing thing to see. It really feels like, it's called Standing with Giants, and I really feel like you are standing with them. And it gives a real, to me, humanization of the area. And I don't want to see it go. But it was really neat to be there and to see that. And you can walk among them. You're allowed to walk out in there. It wasn't cut and the grass was high, but you're allowed to walk in there and take pictures and,
that's cool.
Find ones that maybe could be dedicated, because each of them is supposed to be a certain person, to maybe your ancestor or somebody that you knew from your family or something like that. So that was really neat to see. But I'm happy we got to go there. It is an impressive monument. And again, this is the middle beach. So when you think of the 5 beaches, this is the middle beach. If you do make it out to Gold Beach is one of the few beaches that has preserved a lot of those big guns and a lot of those, what do they call those, babe?
Kind of like little bunkers.
Yeah, they preserve the bunkers
That's
there.
cool.
So you can actually go and see them. They're really well preserved. And so if you make it out to Gold Beach, it's one of those places that if you walk the beach, you can really see a lot of the history still there for you to participate in. So I'm happy we got to go there. I never thought about it as an American. I was like, after Omaha and Utah, you're kind of like, oh, what are the other beaches? So for me, I learned a lot. I got to see it. I really did appreciate it. So I'm happy we went.
People in enemy-occupied territory who lived near the coast were warned to leave their homes as soon as they received a warning of the coming attack. It would come about an hour before the attack, and then they ought at once to make it with all speed for the open country. After communique number 1 had been issued, General Eisenhower broadcast to the people of Western Europe announcing the landing as part of the concerted United Nations plan for the liberation of Europe. He asked them to wait for the signal to rise and strike the enemy. The day will come, he said, when I shall need your united strength. Until that day, I call on you for the hard task of discipline and restraint. Addressing the French people especially, General Eisenhower expressed his pride at having under his command the gallant forces of France. As the initial landing was being made in France, he emphasized the importance of his warning message. A premature rising of all Frenchmen, he told them, may prevent you from being of maximum help to your country in the critical hour. Be patient. Prepare. Great battles lie ahead.
The sun was beginning to set as I walked through the narrow streets of the French town we had just liberated. The air was filled with a mixture of relief and apprehension. The residents, though cautious, peeked out from their homes, and some offering smiles of gratitude. It felt surreal to be standing here in Aromanches, a town that had been under German occupation just hours before. Gold Beach had been a crucible of fire and steel. As an infantryman in the British 50th Division, I had faced the fiercest resistance. The memory was still fresh. The roar of the guns, the whizzing of the bullets, and the cries of my comrades. We had pushed through, determined to secure the beach and move inland. Our objective was clear, to link up with the Americans on Omaha Beach to the west, and the Canadians on Juno Beach to the east. Now, as I stood in the heart of this French town, I reflected on what we had achieved. The Mulberry Harbors were already being constructed, an engineering marvel that would allow us to bring in the supplies we needed for the rest of the campaign. The liberation of this town was just the beginning. We had paved the way for Allied forces to establish a foothold in Normandy, but our mission was far from over. The road ahead was fraught with danger. The Germans were not going to give up easily. Caen, a major objective, lay to the southeast. We had to push forward, liberate more towns, and secure critical supply routes. The success of Operation Overlord depended on our ability to maintain momentum. As I looked around, I saw my fellow soldiers, weary but resolute. Subconsciously, I think I was looking for my older brother. His unit should have jumped in the middle of the night. God willing, I will see him soon. I found a moment of solace, knowing that today we had made a difference. Tomorrow we would continue the fight for freedom, for peace, and for a future where such a conflict would never happen again.
General Eisenhower concluded, I call upon all who love freedom to stand with us. Keep your faith staunch, our arms are resolute. Together we shall achieve victory. And that is the end of this special news bulletin.
Thank you for listening to the Talk with History podcast, and please reach out to us at our website, talkwithhistory.com. But more importantly, if you know someone else that might enjoy this podcast, please share it with them. Shoot them a text and tell them to look us up. We rely on you, our community, to grow, and we appreciate you all every day. We'll talk to you next time. Debating over whether or not to talk about this on Talk with History. So we are going to start kind of a premium podcast. And I'll talk about more about this in the future. So if you're listening, if you made it to the end of this particular episode, I've got some stuff in the works, and we're going to talk a little bit more about the travel aspects of things. And I've got a newsletter and more to follow. So if you're one of our loyal listeners, this is something that you most definitely will be interested in. And again, I'll tease it a little bit more, and we'll talk a little bit more about that kind of stuff.